Hello everybody, this is Karthikeya from CSCB. Topic is crime analysis and prediction using data mining. So, what is data mining? Why we use data mining in crime detection? Crime detection. Let's see. What was the purpose to use crime detection uh, by using modern technologies or data with data mining? So day by day, the crime rate is increasing considerably. So we cannot predict the crimes because the criminals are using modern technologies, high-tech methods. So it's not predictable. Neither it is systematic or random. So it's difficult to predict the crime early. So the main challenge is in front of us is developing a better, efficient crime pattern detection tool to identify crime patterns effectively or to predict crime early. So, what was the main challenges we are facing now to develop crime pattern detection tool or crime pattern detection in the so the challenges were increase in crime information that has to be stored and analyzed. So the already we know that crime rate is increasing. They are before we discuss so that all the crime information should be stored and it should be analyzed then analyze it. But we have another problem here, which is analyzing the data is difficult when the data is incomplete or inconsistent, which means the data is incomplete or we didn't get an accurate information about the crime, then it is difficult to analyze that crime. So limitation in getting crime data records from law enforcement department. So there are some difficulties to get a crime records from law enforcement department. So accuracy of the program depends on accuracy of the training set, which means so if we want to get an accuracy data or an accuracy result, then it depends on the training set. So we know that the patterns, finding the patterns and the trends in crime is a difficult part, but uh, but in some areas, in some places, or in some countries, uh, the crime detections were done manually with the help of multiple reports which were gathered from the crime area and the crime area, and some of the places or some of the departments are using the computer data analysts and their own crime logs. But how? So for instance, one side it is revealed that suspect has black hair, and from next side or witness, yeah, the considered either one side consider the side as a witness or a witness or side. So let us see. One witness said the suspect has black hair, and another suspect said the victim has youth. Uh, the victim looks like youth, and the third the third one reveals that the offender has tattoo on his left arm. So by describing these offender details, it gives a complete picture of different crime incidents. So these are the steps in doing crime analysis: data collection, classification, pattern identification, prediction, and visualization. So in the crime analysis, using the technology or using the computer, we have the steps like data collection and classifying the data and identifying the pattern of the crime and the prediction and the visualization. So data collection, it is nothing but we are collecting the data from different websites like news sites, blogs, social media, RSS feeds, etc. The data collected is stored in the database for further purpose. So here the main important thing is if the crime was detected and we have to find the result of the crime. The data should be stored in the database lifelong, because it will be used in for further purposes. So we need to store every data in the database for further purpose. So since that collected data is unstructured data, we use MongoDB. The crime data is an unstructured data, since the number of field contained and the size of the document can differ from one document to another. The better option is to have a schema less database. Also, the absence of joins reduce the complexity. Other benefits of using an unstructured database is that large volumes of structured and semi-structured and unstructured data, object-oriented programming that is easy to use and flexible. So the advantages of NoSQL database over SQL database is that it allows insertion of data without a predefined schema. Unlike SQL database, it not need to know that what we are storing in advance, specifying its size, etc. So here we know the data collection. Now the classification. In classification, we are using an algorithm called naive Bayes, which is a supervised learning method as well as a statistical method for classification. Naive Bayes classifier is also known as probabilistic classifier. The algorithm classifies a news article into a crime type to which it fits the best. The advantages of using naive Bayes classifier is that it is simple and converges quicker than the logistic regression. Compared to the other algorithms like SVM, support vector machine, which takes a lot of memory, that easiness for implementation and high performance make it different from other algorithms. Coming to the pattern identification, third phase is the pattern identification phase, where we have to identify trends and patterns in crime. So we need to find the pattern and trends in the crime, and all these are come under to the pattern identification phase. So for finding crime pattern that occurs frequently, we are using a priori algorithm. A priori can be used to determine association rules which highlight general trends in the database. The result of this phase is the crime pattern for a particular place. Here, corresponding to each location, we take the attributes of the place like VIP presence, weather attributes, area sensitivity, notable events, presence of criminal groups, etc. We have to take all these, etc. We have to take all this is like attributes. So VIP presence, weather attributes, area sensitivity, which means the area has crimes or less crimes, or the presence of criminal groups are less or more notable events. We have to attributes. We have to take all the things like attributes. After getting a general crime pattern for a place, when a new case arrives and it follows the same crime pattern, then we can say that that area has a chance for crime occurrence. Which means if we identify crime pattern for a place, and when a new case arrives the same place and it follows the same pattern which we get earlier, then we can say that the area has a chance for another crime occurrence. So for a place Meerut, the pattern after mining will be, so we could say attribute 1, attribute 2, attribute 3. So so these are the attributes. When we get the when we get the when we get the pattern, when we follow the pattern, the pattern will be attribute 1, attribute 3, attribute 4, and attribute 5. So the above will be the crime pattern for the Meerut. So crimes occurs only if the above patterns occurs on a day. If any one of these patterns occur, then only we can say that there is a probability for crime occurrence. So you are finding the patterns, we could say there is a probability, or there is a probability of a crime occurrence is there or not there in that place. So prediction. So for prediction, we are using the decision tree concept. So to predict the crime, so we use the method called decision tree concept. So this concept is similar to a graph in which internal node represent test on it attribute. Like it looks like uh, DFS and BFS, breadth for search or depth for search, like tree. So it looks like a tree concept we learned earlier. So it looks like a graph, and the node represent test on it attribute. The nodes are represented attributes, and each branch represents outcomes of a test. So each branch represents the outcomes of a test. The main advantage of using decision tree is it is simple to understand and interpret. The working of decision tree seems to be little confusing, which means it's a little it will be little confusing to the people, but it is really easy to solve, and it is really easy to make. So we classify them according to the order, genus, species, etc. Instead, we have to classify them into a common category as shrubs and tree. So here we see the attribute, the example of the decision make tree. So let's see the attribute. So let's see the attribute one. We see the connections like yes or no. So the attribute one is related to attribute two. Here we see the yes. So the attribute two is related to the attribute one. But the attribute 4 is not related to the attribute 1, and the attribute we could see the attribute 3. So we could if there is a connection between attribute 3 and attribute 2, yes. So this is attribute 3. So here we given the 3 attributes 1 2 3, and we could see the connections, there is a connection or not. So we could mention the like branches like yes or no. So we could understand, uh, could understand this very easily, but it's still complex. So final one is visualization, which means we could visualize the crime patterns which were we could crime patterns. So to represent its visualization, we could use the heat maps, which indicates the level of activity. Usually darker colors to indicate low activity and brighter colors to represent high activity, which means we could see if we could let us see an example that see here, we could see in heat map representing it represents about the crime rate against a woman in India in the year of 2012. So we could see the light colors. We could see the light colors. So in the Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, so Bihar, we could see the less crime rate there against the women. So the less crime rate against the women. So when we could see the in West Bengal, northeastern states, we could see the crime rate. We could see the high crime rate against the women. So we can represent the crime rate using heat maps, and we could visualize the area is active on crime rates or not. So we could easily analyze whether the area, whether we get whether if the crime is happened in the Rajasthan, we could see the crime rate is high on against the women. So if we get a crime rate against the women in the Rajasthan, we could easily uh, solve the cases because we have the data and other things. So this is the example. So we could see the advantages of heat maps. So numeric and category based color images, gradient color range, analyze only the data we want. Out of range data is automatically discarded. So Using these heat maps, we could easily identify the data using the numerics or category based color images. So and we could easily analyze the data only we want, and the out of the range data is automatically discarded. So we know, so by knowing about the probable regions, we could prevent crimes by taking preventive mechanism like night patrolling, fixing burglar alarms, fixing CCTV cameras, etc. So we could so we with the help of heat maps, we come to know that Rajasthan is a high crime rates against the women. Uh, so we could uh, take the precautions to reduce the crime rate against the women, like patrolling, night patrollings, she teams, and night CCTV cameras, and other vagera prevention methods. So it helps to prevent the crime rate, different types of crime rates in different areas using the data mining. So these are the methods which we could predict the crimes using the data mining. Thank you so much.